First spoke with Brad was way back in 2011. I woke him up from a nap to interview him for a blog at Seedstock. And at the time, he and John were working alternate shifts around the clock to get their first prototype ready. They now have, I believe, 20 freight farms out in the world and have a very exciting app to announce today. So I'm going to hand it over to them. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm actually going to switch to this other mic. If that's...
That ag bug bites you, you are just focused. I've seen it so many times where someone's like, oh yeah, like I'm really getting into hydroponics, I'm so excited about it. 5 years later, they're still in the game and they're doing something wild. But for everyone in the room, they've had that moment where they're, I don't know why, it is so attractive. It might be because of a lot of plant science, it might be because of the big impact that you can do socially, globally, the environmental impact, or maybe you're just looking at that market and you're like, yep, there's a pretty big opportunity here. So however you got into it, it's really great to see so many different walks of life in the room today. So I wanted to talk a little bit about where everybody's kind of starting with the technology. If you're jumping in, you're looking at basically two camps of technology. You're in the hobby camp, or you're in the commercial camp. And you go to that hydro greens, hydro store, and you're like, okay, I want to buy some lights, I want to buy the NFT setup, get that going, and you're like, okay, now I need 200 of these. So you switch over to the commercial side. But that space in between is where I would guess most people in the room are landing right now. There's a few people who already have commercial setups, but you've done the hobby thing, you know what you want, you know what your market's going to be, but you want to jump in. And unless you have a lot of capital, it's basically a go big or go home scenario with the technology. You have to have a lot of money or literally go home and do it as a hobby. So we really want to change that way of thinking. About 5 years ago, we were up on a rooftop with a distributor. We wanted to bring rooftop agriculture to Boston. We wanted to help. And, he was totally funded. Capital. He had the infrastructure to actually do something with this structure once it was up. So we're like, okay, we'll help go through this challenge and let you know you're going to have to do stuff with feasibility. You're going to have to look at that structure. And you're going to have to design it. Then we're going to have to ship in all the parts, source all the materials, have a construction period. Then we're going to do the build out. You're going to train a team. Then you're going to have to figure out a process and a workflow for how this is all going to work. And that sound familiar to anybody? I feel like that's probably what a lot of you guys are looking at right now. And when we told them all that, it's like, here's your entry point. Go for it. The conclusion it comes to is, this is not in my core business. In agriculture, urban agriculture, might not be for me. We don't like that. I think everybody here, is facing some part of rough entry point, a high barrier to entry. So if we can collectively try to reduce that barrier to entry, I think we're going to see a conference like this maybe take up a few more rooms next year. So for us, that solution is modular farming. The shipping container, which is our holy grail, I guess. We see that not just for the structural benefits, there are a bunch. Modular, stackable. This is a universal structure. So if you go to another country, you go here, wherever you're going to scale manufacturing, you're working with the same vessel. It's portable, accessible, and very durable. So we really have a lot of flexibility on how to use these. So I think the main point of why we think modular has so much potential is because we have a standard. We have a standard to scale on top of. We have a rule that when I go to a farm in Minnesota, or I go to a farm in LA, or I go to a farm in Texas, it's all going to be the same. So from a company troubleshooting standpoint, you could call me and I could say, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. I can't tell you the amount of hours that Horde Americas has spent on the phone with us during our development phase, troubleshooting stuff, just to tell us, yeah, that's not for you. And I say, hey, that's, Chris, thank you for all the time you spent. Sorry, we can't buy any more product. And that's, as somebody coming into this industry as a vendor, there's a huge learning curve for you as well. Saying, okay, so what is your custom, unique application all about? You spend a lot of time going through the weeds finding out. And, this isn't a huge, huge resource company most of the time. They usually do one or two products. Spend that time to find out it's not right for you. That's a big drain. So being able to go to something that has a standard rule of thumb, that people can implement things and share and learn, something that we think is very exciting. So the shipping container, of course, it's able to go in situations that really greenhouses have some limitations. So obviously on a boat, on a truck, to go wherever you want to go, as well as different climates. It's great to have a vessel that you can say, this is the environment that we're going to carve out. No matter where we're going to put it, we're always going to have that standard which to scale from. Say, okay, you got efficiency down to X. You got your labor down to X. And now you know from which to get 2 more containers or 10 more containers. So this is something that, maybe you're going to get better efficiency in the snow because you're going to bring in that cool air to cool down some of the warm temperature. Or maybe you're going to use it to do lights at nighttime and use it dark during the day to get some efficiencies there. Having that box that we can share the results from one to the next, I think is a very powerful thing. And really easy to scale. So rather than just stacking them, you can put them side by side. So the client we have in East Boston is up to 4 already. More snowy pics. This is actually a shipping container in Minnesota that was growing in the -21 polar vortex this past winter. And so they shared this picture with us and we're bragging about it a little bit. So, where we go from the inside, the box is great. It's great to ship around. But where do we go next? It's really make tools for our customers not to spend so much time on the growing. And for an indoor ag concert, I wish this was an indoor ag concert. For an indoor ag conference, it seems weird to say, all right, let's spend less time on the growing, but these are processes that we've all dialed in. We've all found to be the way we want to replicate. That's where we spend the least amount of time. The most amount of time that our clients are investing is in growing their business, in branding, it's in packaging, it's in the day-to-day tasks. So the more we can dial those processes in, work around the workflow, work around the basically the usability and the human-centered design, we're going to see a lot more efficiencies break out as people start to scale. So we have had to develop a few things to try to fit everything in the container, but starting with a tried and true growing apparatus developed by PhD Nate Story in the house, leading aquaponics expert. If you haven't talked to him, you definitely should. But working with him to develop something that would be vertical rather than doing racks and using more infrastructure. That enabled us to actually build an LED system around that, provided a vertical growing system and a vertical LED system. This really gives us a lot of flexibility to move stuff around, to get into the plants, and also have a really nice workflow with anybody going into the container. That's Phil, just loving his plants. Yeah. So, this is kind of a jumping off point for us, and what we want to talk about today, and what we want to announce to everybody today is something we've been working on. We're always looking at different ways to do containers and different types of containers. But where we see the most value is actually tools for farmers. So tools for farmers to grow their business rather than work on the plants. I think there's a huge gap in this industry of ways to help farmers for that next step. Obviously we talked about financing today, we talked about a lot of ways to help your organizational structure, but the day-to-day operations, I think, is where a huge time suck happens, and you end up being more a CEO than a grower. So we really want to help that out and use the tools that everybody uses today with every business and catch farming up to that. So we're announcing FarmHand. FarmHand is the smart farm. This is how we interact with our farms right now. It's on the App Store. We've got it today. All your temp, all your humidity, CO2, pH, conductivity, and water temperature. Monitor right through your phone. You can track all your data for the environment and your climate for however long back you'd like to decide. You can set alerts for different high temperatures, low temperatures, high settings, and low. So if you don't want it to get below 6, you'll get an alert. So you know to go to the farm. Because sometimes you don't really need to go to the farm. And you can focus on other parts of your business. Also, equipment monitoring. This is a big piece of what's going on inside, because half the time, you want to check on pumps or valves or cleaning things, turning things quickly on and off, rather than going into a third-party operating system, just using the same device that you're using day-to-day for most other applications that you have, doing that fast toggle on and off, as well as images from within the farm. So like I said, this is something we're unveiling today, and it's going to be on the App Store. Unfortunately, you do have to have a farm to use it. But later in the week, we will be releasing a demo code, so everybody can kind of peek inside of our farms. We'll have one set up, and we're looking forward to share that with you. Here you can see one of our freight farmers kind of showing off the tracking, the alerts. And I think he's going to get to some of the video feed as well. He's got a slow finger. So this is really where we see the future of our products going. We see the connectivity between the farm and the business getting stronger. More tools that transcend the growing, and more tools that help the farmer push their product and become that small entrepreneur or big entrepreneur, however they want to scale their business. So before I introduce Brad and get him up on stage, I do want to play a video for you of a couple of our farmers in action. These are those folks we saw in East Boston, and then another distributor after that.
Yeah, I think we were both surprised that the process of just planting and letting things grow was a little easier than we might have suspected. It worked. We planted the seeds, they sprouted, they grew little teeny plants, they grew a little bit bigger plants, and we transplanted them, and they grew into full-size plants. So it worked. That's been one of the learnings. It did produce, basically according to expectation. Every week you'd have a harvest. The harvest would be very similar in size, so you could sort of count on it. And so it's been all going to wholesale in Boston this year. Hi, I'm Sean Cooney, and this is Connie Cooney.
And we are the owners of Cornerstock Freight Farm. We're farmers. We have one farm now in Newmarket Square, 2 farms in East Boston, and 2 more on the way that will also be in East Boston. My favorite thing about owning a freight farm and developing Cornerstock as a business is the fact that it's a brand new field for me, for both of us. We as a community, as a society, have to look at food, our food source and how we're growing it, and it's kind of exciting to be on the cutting edge with freight farms to look at all of that.
One of the things I love about our business is we're a Boston-based company. As the demand for local produce began to rise, one of the things that we looked at is how could the city of Boston ever be able to offer fresh produce to the customers in the city. Freight Farms offered us a solution for that, and we were able to do that right next to our warehouse. Ted Katzer's and Katzer's Brothers Produce. We are a produce wholesaler. We deal in all food service, so we're delivering to restaurants, hotels, hospitals throughout the greater New England area. When I was looking where our herbs are coming from, I was noticing that a lot of them were grown out of the U.S. There was a ton of freight that was being accumulated, and the cost was just rising. The biggest thing to me is the shelf life. Shelf life is just top-notch compared to what we're getting, because we're cutting out so many different channels of transportation. You're not having product go from Columbia to Miami and then trucked up from Miami to Boston. You're getting it from your backyard, or side of the warehouse in my situation. I actually like to talk about what's in the future for us. We have a 150-mile radius around our warehouse that we're distributing to. So what I'm really looking forward to is other freight farmers to be starting up their businesses and for us to be able to collect the product throughout that 150-mile radius and bring it back to our warehouse to distribute on a greater level than we'd be able to accomplish. Our chefs are constantly asking for information of where their food comes from, so they're able to relate it onto their menus or when they're talking to their guests. So that's what freight farms will be able to give us a story behind the food and for a location of where their food's coming from.
All right, there we go. Hi, everybody. My name is Brad, one of the co-founders here at Freight Farms, and we were really excited to take the opportunity to show you guys a little snippet of what just a few of our freight farmers are up to, because we think their story is pretty cool, and that's really what we're sort of all about, is trying to help farmers, whoever they are, start the business they want to start and get to the size, scale, and scope that is best for them. We're here to talk about technology to build a modular food network. So I really want to look at, we showed you a little bit about Freight Farms, the first digital food rolled out with Farmhand, but really what our vision is for, what a connected food network looks like, how it operates, how we see it, and the potential there, which we're really excited about. One of the things that a network starts with is communication. It doesn't really matter what that network is. It could be a social network, a book club, whatever it is. It's communication, and communication that's relevant to each member of that network. And that's what Farmhand enables our farmers to do. It allows them to communicate and share information in a way that's effective and relevant to them in every step of the way. Because running a business in general requires a ton of communication. Just check your inbox. And I watch all of us, I'm sure we're all doing the same thing. Paying attention, I'm sure, but also checking our phones, getting text messages, checking voicemails, replying to emails. And that's just to run a business. Then there's the farm side of running a farm business, which is extremely difficult. So to be successful in that, with Farmhand and some of the technology and connecting with the farms, it's allowing farmers to streamline that communication so that it's part of your daily communication chain, but it's simple to get to, it's simple to access, and it can be powerful for you. Because right now there's certain lines of communication. You have farmer to farm, so you can also be communicating with your farm, know what's going on. Also, farmer to supplier. What do I need? What's not in stock? What's in stock? How am I going to get that? Farmer to the end user, customer. Be it retail, market, wholesaler, wherever that product is actually going. But then the key levels of communication that are probably most important for improving as a farmer are that farmer-to-farmer communication, and then that farmer to many farms level of communication. And that's really what it's all about, because that's the most difficult thing to do. We have enough to do just running our business and running our farm, and it's really difficult to communicate. And I think it was Caleb yesterday really made some great points about being able to share data that is applicable to the situation that you're in as a farmer. And that's really where we see one of the critical points. And so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about Farmhand. That's what we talk about. We're talking about connected food network. So that it's a tool that encourages that communication. And it's exciting to launch Farmhand today and have 10 plus farms throughout the country that are now a community of growers. They've been communicating for the last months to a year plus, in some cases, sharing information. But it allows like a farmer in Minnesota to directly share best practices with a farmer in Texas who's getting started. The farmer in Texas decides that his business and his market calls for him to produce kale and chard for a juice bar as part of it. But he's never made that transition before. He can lean on the back of a farmer in Minnesota who's used the exact same standard platform and tools to make that transition so that he can improve exponentially with each person that joins the network. which is really exciting to see because then they're talking and it's relevant information to improve. So they're not only improving their growing, they also are improving their business. So the conversation of, hey, how do I approach that grocer? On the network, there's a farmer that is at probably the same size, scale, scope today or was, who could say, I spoke directly to the produce buyer, but in this type of chain, what I found was I needed to actually go to the assistant manager. Just little inside tips like that are really intimidating about running a business because there is no one best way to do that, especially when it comes to approaching customers. And so one of the things that is really kind of exciting is the fact we're all here today. 3 years ago there was no Indoor Ag Conference. 4 years ago, John and I were on the phone, with Nate, Chris, and a number of other people that are in this room today, just trying to figure it all out. And there's so many talented people sitting in this room. Some who have been in the indoor ag industry from the very beginning, and some who are just trying to figure out how they fit. And that's really what is exciting for us, is that there's a whole population of people that want to, and some need to be, in the business of local food. They just have questions. And they're about a year or so behind a lot of people that are in this room. But just like all of those people, and like John, myself, and everybody here, everyone has a unique set of skills and strengths. Like we talked about, there's so many steps in this, so many different skills that you need to have. So some people might be great at design, some have background in construction, some might be growers, marketers, sellers, whatever those skills and strengths are. The whole idea behind Freight Farms is to develop connected tools that allow you to leverage those strengths and then not have your business be anchored by your current weaknesses and allow you to be lifted up and move forward so that you can actually create the business that you need to create. So if you're a simple operator that wants to be, like we talked about yesterday in one of the sessions, very much wants to be a farmer, wants to be very in touch with the plants, wants to be doing that every day. You can start with 1 to 2 farms. And that might be the business that fits you, fits your market, and fits what you want to do. But if you have a desire to be bigger, be a bigger player, it's helpful to be able to start at a level quickly, put product in the market, scale up, and know exactly what you're doing, and then become that CEO grower. So to get back sort of on the topic of why we're doing Modular Food Network, the idea is kind of, how do we see it operate? What is it? The way we see it is nodes of operation. In our instance, in this, I'll use Freight Farms as the example because I'm biased and that's what I know. It could be one farm or it could be 1,000 farms. But like I touched on, each farm is suited to that operator's business. If it's very small and very niche, focus on that. Be good at that. Develop that. If it's larger, 1,000 farms, distributed maybe throughout the urban environment at a wholesale side, focus on that. Get good at that. And optimize for that. So the idea of the connected network, what does it do? Obviously, it connects. It also assists being able to talk to other farmers. It also facilitates those transactions. One of the things that I'm really excited about that's really fun to watch for our farmers is when they're able to sort of bounce and balance with the supply and demand in their market and play a little bit like the big boys, whether they're large or small. For instance, the grower we have in Central Mass, who is focused on a couple of small, very retail markets, very niche, focused on premium pricing, all that. If one of his 2 main markets, has a down week or, whatever happens, he's literally stuck holding the bag. But being connected, he can reach out to the network, to someone like Katsouris Brothers, say, hey, I've got 60 pounds of basil, and I just need to move it so I'm not stuck holding this bag. And it's a tough week for him, but it doesn't set his business back. So this is sort of a rough view of sort of how we see what the network we're looking to develop is. But the whole thing is that we got into this, and the reason I'm sure a number of you are in this room is we got into this for a much bigger purpose, a much larger goal than just this, and what to think about what that bigger picture is, is really where this Indoor Ag conference and the growth of this industry sort of comes into play, is opening it up to more and more people to build a business that is most appropriate for them and be able to share lessons, share best practices, share food safety tips, all of these things across a platform that is uniform. When we talk about this network, when I talk about this conference and everybody sitting here, as it grows and as the industry grows, matures, and changes, one of the things we see in this connected network is encouraging everyone. Sort of the same way a number of companies have developed all sorts of different tools to allow everybody to be connected a little bit more. Because the bigger idea that we really talk about, behind closed doors and in the office, and we get a little bit pie in the sky of, hey, remember 2009, why did we actually want to do this in the first place, is the idea of food independence. And food independence as a business, but food independence just for food's sake. So that, a region, for instance, like Boston and New England, just being food independent for a single crop would be an enormous achievement and can only be achieved by collaboration and connection and being able to share and communicate between farmers. So, that's really what we're all about, and one of the reasons we've built sort of a diverse team back in Boston to be able to support our farmers as best we can and sort of facilitate better conversations between people who are doing really great things and developing really cool business models using the platform. But rather than show more videos or go at length about how great I think Freight Farms is and where this industry is going, we had a unique opportunity to actually have somebody who's sort of gone through the process of evaluating, moving into the indoor agricultural industry and has come to some really cool conclusions, has a really interesting opinion on how he got where he is today, where he's going in the future, and what he's going to do. And I've actually asked him to come up here and share with you guys just his story a little bit, so you don't have to listen to me talk for another 5 minutes about some other no-name person. Rather, let you hear from an actual person and, ask us questions and go from there. So without further ado, I'd really like to introduce Jack Austin, who's here with us today. Jack,